Welcome to Flash Tracks Woodworking. Today's project is going to be some serving trays like these. A couple things I like about these is the way that they nest together. And the other thing I like is sort of the whole see-through that you get here that allows you to pick up both trays together. They store better that way being nested. So I'm going to repeat that aspect. I'm going to make the fit a little tighter than these two that I made by hand. And I'm also going to add a monogram here because this is going to be a gift set for a recently married couple. I mentioned that these were handmade. In this project I'm going to use the CNC machine because it makes the construction of these handles much simpler. The materials I'm going to use will be this one board that is 1/2 inch by 5.5 inches by 2 feet long, solid oak. That will make the handles and the side rails. And then also for the bottoms, I've got a sheet of 1/4 inch oak plywood that will again make the bottoms for the two serving trays. So with that, our next step is to head to the computer and make some drawings.
The first drawing is a basic layout for both the inner tray and the outer tray containing all the critical dimensions. Up here in the corner we see the outside of the larger tray, the inside of the tray, inside of the side rail, and the handle. We have the depth of the notch, which is going to accept this inner tray bottom, as well as the gap that I'm leaving myself for clearance between the slot and the size of that bottom. Zoom back out, we'll see that we also have kind of a preview of what the monogram is going to look like in the center of the tray. The next drawing is a drawing of the side rails. For the side rails, we have the groove that's going to be in there to accept the tray bottoms. It extends a bit beyond the rail itself so that we make sure we clear all this material out. And we also have the hold down screw locations. I'm not going to clamp just at the ends because it could bow in the center, so I've got some clamp down locations here for some clamp down screws. If we go over to the 3D view, we can render this and we'll see the side rails rendered. We see the 4 rails, 2 for the larger tray, 2 for the smaller tray. The groove for the bottoms is shown in black, and then you see a cutout all the way around the rails, as well as these tabs that are left in there to keep the material secure throughout the machining operation.
The next step is to set up to cut the side rails in the CNC machine.
In this scene, I'm establishing the zeros for the X and Y axes by referencing to the lower left corner of the workpiece. Then I'll move to the center of the job and use the touch plate to establish the Z, or the height zero. After that, I'm going to mark a few places on the workpiece where I want to put hold down screws. I did not leave myself a lot of extra room because I wanted to maximize my use of the material, so I have to be careful where I put the hold down screws so I don't hit them with the router bit. I'm using the drawing and going to the locations where I want to put those screws. Then I'll mark them with the bit. After I've finished marking all the hold down screw locations, I will move the router out of the way, pre-drill the holes, and then add the hold down screws. After I add those screws, I am going to re-zero the Z-axis. The process of screwing the workpiece down to the spoil board could change the reference surface slightly, so I'm going to redo that zeroing operation. After that's completed, I add the dust boot to the CNC and then launch the operation that cuts out the side rails. You'll notice in the video there are no sparks flying off the heads of the screws, so that means I managed to miss them with the router. With the side rail machining completed, I'll move the router out of the way, remove the dust boot, vacuum up what the dust boot missed, unclamp the workpiece, remove the hold down screws, and display the result. This third drawing is of the tray handles. Similar to the side rails, except of course it has a place for the grips. 2 for the smaller tray, 2 for the larger tray, cut out of a piece 2 feet long, 5.5 inches wide, 1/2 inch thick. I'll zoom in here to the central portion to show one critical dimension. That is, the smaller tray handle at the corner is 3/4 of an inch tall, and that has to match the distance from the top side of the tray bottom to the top of the handle on the larger tray. This way they'll be flush at the top and nest properly. The red circles that we see here are the locations for the hold down screws, again to keep the material secure during the machining operation. Zoom out, go over to 3D, look first at the slots and render that. Then we'll add the outline of the handles. So we see here now we've got the 4 handles cut out. We have the slots in black again, the cutout all the way around, and then the tabs to hold the materials in place. Next, we'll deal with the tabs at the end of the handle machining operation. There are several options when it comes to removing the tabs. One would be to use a thin blade such as a hacksaw blade, but I find what works best is just take a small chisel, drop it down on the tab, give it a tap with a hammer, and remove your finished pieces from the overall workpiece. The downside of using tabs is, of course, leaves you a little extra sanding work to do. But I find that you can clean up these tab remnants quite nicely with a little 1-inch sander, and working with oak, you can make those tabs virtually disappear. Now that the side rails and handles have been cleaned up, it's time to add the miters. I actually could have used the CNC to create the miters as well, and even though I enjoy making drawings, I realized that the CNC for miters, that's overkill. I am adding a spoil board though. It will support the back of the material as I make the cuts, and it will provide a reference edge for me to line up the boards as I'm ready to add the miters. I'll rotate the saw, I'll trim the spoil board, and then I'll be ready to cut the 16 45-degree miters that I need for this project. Next step is to install a 1/8 inch roundover bit on the router table and soften up those edges on the corners of the side rails and the handles. All of the cuts for the solid 1/2 inch oak boards are now completed. It's time to move on to the tray bottoms. I'll be making 2 cross cuts and 2 rip cuts along the grain to create the bottoms for the trays.
Now we have all the pieces for the larger tray. Time to do a dry fit, make sure everything lines up. Looks good. Now to check, see if the small tray pieces fit as well. Small tray also looks good, at least on the dry fit. Now it's time to go do the artwork for the monogram that I want to put in the center of each of these trays.
Here's a drawing of the smaller tray, focusing on the monogram. In this particular style, we have the monogram plus a bit of a flourish on the side. That was one option. Another possibility is what I'm calling the wreath. Same monogram basically, but with more of a wreath. I think I like this option better. Another possibility is to add in a date for the event, the wedding that we're celebrating with this gift. But I think maybe not. I think I like it without the date. So we'll use this artwork and use the laser to etch this into the center of the small board in this case, and then a similar monogram for the larger tray. With the toolpath for the laser monogram in hand, I will power up the CNC controller, remove the prop block, clamp the tray bottom, zero the X and Y axes, double check the board measurements, remove the router bit, install the laser head, clean the laser lens, power up the laser controller and arm it, and finally burn the monogram and the wreath.
I've got all the pieces laid out now for the smaller of the two trays. I've stained the bottom, but I'm not going to stain the handles or the side rails until I get it assembled, because I know I'm going to have to touch up around the corner a little bit. And that's it for the gluing. These strap clamps are great. If you're doing any kind of picture frame or work like this, highly recommend getting one of these strap clamps. They are the ticket. Both trays are glued up now. The glue is dry. Time to release the clamp from the large tray, and I'll get some 220 sandpaper and touch up some of the edges just to make sure everything is smooth before we move on to staining. Get rid of that final bit of dust before I apply the stain. I'll be putting on a bit of this golden oak. I don't want to darken the wood too much. I just want to bring out the grain a bit and just soften that kind of blonde look that it has right now. Both trays are stained and ready for a final finish. I'll be using this Watco butcher block oil. It will darken the finish just a bit and make the grain a bit richer, and it's also food safe, so I like using this to do the finishing work. I've got a drying rack set up here with some pins on it that will accommodate these trays when they're done, and we'll let them dry overnight and decide tomorrow whether we need another coat or two on those. So with that, we will get to the finish on the trays. After applying 3 coats of butcher block oil, I've got the surface finish on these boards that I was going for. I've also got a nice nesting that I wanted here and a good flush see-through finish like I showed earlier on the current boards. So, pretty happy to be able to give these as a wedding gift. So, Jesse and Yee, congratulations once again on your marriage. Let the trays remind you that although you're starting out with a good fit, serving one another will go a long way to nurturing your marriage. As far as the project is concerned, I'll put some descriptions down below the tools and materials that I use. While you're down there wandering around, feel free to leave a comment or a question. Hit the subscription and the notification bell if you'd like to see more videos like this. For existing videos, you'll see my most recent upload magically appear in the upper right of your screen. In the lower right of your screen, you'll see a video that YouTube thinks you might enjoy based on your viewing history. As always, thanks for watching Flash Tracks Woodworking. See you next time.